guys, welcome back to Room 237 as I continue my marathon of Italian horror and Giallo films. And this is another one that I've wanted to get to for quite some time, especially since it's from my favorite Italian filmmaker, Sergio Martino, which I've already reviewed his first 5 Gialli, and now this is his 6th. I've heard mixed things about this film, but I was still eager to check it out. I still need to see Scorpion with Two Tails. But this is 1975's The Suspicious Death of a Minor. And this is the Arrow Blu-ray. And yes, I did flip the jacket around. Of course, that's the one it comes with. I don't mind this cover. I think it does look a bit more kind of like a spaghetti western. I do like that cover more, even though I think Casanelli kind of looks like Val Kilmer in that cover. So it came out in 1975, which of course Giallo had at that time pretty much been pushed out and replaced by the polizieschi genre. That's what was reigning supreme by 75, which the last film I reviewed, What Have They Done to Your Daughters, is what's known as the hybrid of Giallo and polizieschi, which came out in 74, that transitional period. This, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a hybrid. It's still very much Giallo. It does have sort of the polizieschi action sequences, but where the main character, Paolo, is sort of the unofficial, he's unofficially in law enforcement. I would say he's still an everyday person, especially for like the first half of the film where we think he's an everyday person. It definitely fits more of a Giallo than like the police procedural. So, yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a blend of polizieschi, even though the timeline does make sense. But it's certainly more of a Giallo with a lot of comedy. This probably has some of the most humorous writing and a lot of comedy in it. Some is a hit, some of it's a miss. Not all of it is entirely funny. It was also released as Too Young to Die, which I like this title more. It was written by Martino and Ernesto Gastaldi, who wrote, I believe, all of his other Gialli, at least the first 5 that I reviewed. He's also my favorite Italian writer. Of course, it was produced by his brother Luciano Martino, and it stars Claudio Casanelli, Mel Ferrer, Leah Tanzi, Gianfranco Barra. Music by Luciano Michaelini, which the music is also kind of like What Have They Done to Your Daughters. It has the sort of actiony, upbeat, polizieschi type music. It does have the sort of goblin-y Giallo music. And then it has really zany, upbeat, comedy type pieces. But I will say, when it's the Giallo music, whether it be like a nice Morricone piece or something that actually sounds a lot like Goblin, like when the hitman is going after the, I guess, secretary or receptionist of the boarding house, that's a very Goblin-sounding piece of music. Those pieces I do really like. Also stars... It does star people from other Giallo as well, such as Gianfranco Barra was also in Scorpion with Two Tails. He plays Inspector Tetti. The hitman with the reflective glasses, Roberto Passi, he was in Let Sleeping Corpses Lie. And of course, uh, Claudio Castagnoli was in Murder Rock and What Have They Done to Your Daughters, which this is a very different role compared to What Have They Done to Your Daughters for Castagnoli. It's kind of interesting watching these two back to back, because in that, he almost feels like Gordon in the TV version of Gotham. You know, very driven to do the right thing, really wants results. Here, he's kind of a loose cannon. Like, he does want results first and foremost, but he'll use violence even as a first resort. He's kind of an asshole. I mean, a lot of his humor does come from his sarcasm and his lack of care for the well-being of others. I do kind of wonder what someone like Fabio Testi would have done with the Paolo role. But I did think Castagnoli did fine. Massimo Girotti was in Bear and Blood, and the young girl Gloria was played by Jenny Tamburi, who was in The Psychic. So, a pretty decent cast as well. There is one fun Easter egg was because there's this one girl that's sort of the last one left later on in the film. So Paolo has his helper, Giannino, this young pickpocket, get close to her and try to get information. So he takes her to the movies. And at the movies, like, the way the scene opens up is on this giant reflective poster, and we see their reflections walk up. That's how, in the reflection, that's how the scene starts. And it is a poster for Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Had the Key. It's this exact poster. Probably my favorite. No, that's not true. It's Torso. Torso's my favorite Martino film, but this and Mrs. Ward would have to be a tie for my second favorite. Also one of my favorite Gialli of all time. So that was a fun little Easter egg. I will say this is my least favorite so far of the Martino films I've seen, especially in his Gialli I've seen. It's not a bad film. I mean, it's still well done. It's still well shot, well acted. I would say it's not as entertaining. It does feel a bit more draggy. It is more boring. It's not as intriguing or immersive. Even Gastaldi went on to say he considers this to be in his words, a minor film. He said, quote, like, he didn't feel that Martino could give it the shot in the arm that he normally gives it. Meaning, he didn't really think Martino could really thrive and really make this film pop like he usually does. Which, there are some decent shots in this, but I would say it is nowhere near as stylish as his other ones. I mean, especially, it's not really fair to compare it to, say, All Colors of the Dark, because that is a nightmarish film. But to something like Mrs. Ward, well, actually, that has a very trippy sequence, too. But to something like Torso or Your Vice is a Locked Room, yeah, it's nowhere near as stylish or as interesting. Each, further step in the mystery isn't really all that interesting. So I would say this is the weakest that I've seen so far, but I wouldn't go as far to say it's one of the worst Gialli. I mean, this is not going to be a rant by any means. It's still a decent film. I would sort of put this in the mid-range of Gialli. You have the best up here, worst down here, and then you just sort of have, they exist. I'm glad I saw them. Not good, not bad. I would kind of put it in that realm. So definitely not one of my favorites. The worst I could say is I would say for a Martino film, it is kind of disappointing. That's probably the worst I can say about it. Now, it opens up with this young girl named uh, uh, Marissa, who she attends this dance party. This guy, Paolo, played by Castellini, he tries to dance with her, or he tries to pick her up. She dances with him, and then she flees, and she's chased by this guy with the reflective sunglasses. He's a hitman. She's able to get on a train. She gets to this boarding house, but he finds her and he slits her throat, stabs her in the face. And this is one of those gialli where, yeah, that's the guy doing the killing in this film. He pops up a few times and does a few more kills. But it's not about who he is and why he's doing it. It's obvious he's a hitman. I mean, they even made the choice to not give him the black gloves or the jacket, or even really to obscure his face outside the sunglasses, because it's not about his identity. And I think by showing him pretty much as is, it proves that he's a hitman. He's working for someone, so it's who is he working for and why? Like, what's the angle of the person he's working with? That's the mystery aspect of the giallo, which you don't get a lot of those. You don't get a lot where the person who's actually doing the killing, with their hand, people are dying by their hand, is not the focus. So I will say that's an interesting aspect, but I just wish it was a kind of a better movie. The police really don't give a damn. In fact, Paolo, which, to kind of show how the police, the inspector, Teti or Tatey, whatever his name was, he asks if there's a trail of love juice near her. That's what he calls it, love juice. I guess that's his way of asking if there's been sexual assault, which there wasn't. But then him and his partner are in like this cafe or this diner, and they're just talking about soccer and the lottery. It kind of reminded me of, oh, which one was it? I think it was Scorpion's Tail. The Case of Scorpion's Tail that had the stamp collecting. It kind of reminded me of that because all he talks about is the lottery and betting on the soccer team. I guess it gets to show how inept and careless they are. And Paolo overhears how they're not going to do anything about this girl's case. It's going to go cold, no one's going to claim her, and it's going to die. So that's when he decides to pick up the case on his own. So that's why it does feel more like a a Giallo, because he does at that point still seem like an everyday person. Of course, later on in the film, you find out he is an inspector on an unofficial level. But there's also a fun scene where, and also that's a lot of the comedy is how they're always talking about bets in the lottery. But Giannino, the young pickpocket, who looks like a very, very young Al Pacino in some shots. He's on his scooter and he snags the inspector's gold lighter. But when he's yelling about it, there's like prostitutes and people near him going, "Oh yeah, bad people around here, just all us useless prostitutes and drug dealers," pretty much saying, "Why should we help you? Because you look down on us." But I'm not going to go too deep into the plot because I feel like I do that too much and it really makes my videos drag. So I'm going to try to be shorter on this one. But so Paolo enlists the help of the pickpocket. Well, first he goes to the boarding house and he attacks that secretary. He starts strangling her with the phone cord to ask questions. She gives him a name, which is the name is Menga, Menga. And right then we find out he's part of this prostitution ring that traffics minors. So then he enlists the help of the pickpocket. Again, sorry I'm stuttering so much. Which I keep wanting to call Giannino. I keep getting his name wrong. He enlists the help of him, so they get on a scooter. And they steal all these purses from prostitutes, which is another kind of humorous scene. And he lets Giannino keep all the good stuff. He just wants the address books so he can find Menga, where he lives. They find that the one constant phone number or address in all the books was this agency, this a babysitter agency, which is a front. Like, yeah, they hand out babysitters, but it's the front for also giving teenage prostitutes. Also, a running gag is Paolo keeps breaking his eyeglasses, which sometimes I think gives it a bit of a noir feel. Like, he at one point he just continues the movie with a busted lens. Kind of reminded me of like Jack Nicholson with his broken nose in Chinatown, sort of like that neo-noir. But so he does get the agency to give him this one girl who, what was her name? Was it Carla? Carmela. Carmela, who he still pays. At one point, he does have sex with her, to show like he's still sort of morally ambiguous. But he pays her for information mostly. And there was one funny scene where he throws money at her in her apartment for information. Then when he leaves, he says, "Oh, don't hide your money in the TV set. Thieves know all the tricks." So he paid her with her own money. I thought that was kind of funny. So she helps him a little bit. And then, but she helps get this girl, Floriana, played by Barbara Magnolfi, who was also in a Suspiria, who is a prostitute, which he even watches her undress before he says, "Oh, I'm not your client, but your client left me this check." So he gives it to her. She goes to take it to her pimp, of course, and they follow. Pimp gets mad because the check is bogus, it's signed. So then, just as he's about to beat her, Paolo comes in, they both draw guns. The pimp ends up getting killed. Turns out it's Menga. But then they find out the whole case opens up even more because there was a kidnapping. Like it's involved with like the kidnapping of a businessman's son. They find 2 billion lira, which was the ransom money for that. Could potentially be linked to this very powerful banker, and a whole thing with banks and unmarked bills. It just opens up. So after that, there's a car chase because the inspector recognizes the kid that stole his lighter. So they chase the car. They get to the station and they realize, oh, it's just Paolo. And they all greet him as inspector, but they give the 2 billion lira. So that's when we find out he's a cop. And also about this movie, it does have some decent action movie pieces. It does focus more on car chases and fights. There's even a shootout on a roller coaster. Because at one point, Paolo and Giannino take Giannino's younger brother to a carnival. They get on the roller coaster, and there's another guy, not sunglasses, but this other guy, on the roller coaster shooting at them. So then there's a chase, which he chases him down into a subway, and he gets hit by the train. But, Anyway, I guess from this point on, I'll get into spoilers. So, I think if you're more into action, you'll actually enjoy this film. Like, if you find Giallo to be a little bit slow, but you like Poliziotteschi films, I think you'll like this. If you love Giallo, you might also still like this. I mean, especially if you would like your Giallo to have a little bit more action or humor, this one has it. If you're a Martino fan like I am, and you sort of look at his films, like you have sort of the same favorites, like Torso, both Vice films are up top, you might be a little disappointed by this. I know some people don't like a lot of humor in their Giallo. This one does have a lot of it. Some of it works. I mean, the gag with the broken glasses and the character of Paolo, that humor kind of works. But some of the other humor, not so much. It just feels kind of silly. I do like the Goblin pieces of music. I will say, normally I don't care about the action set pieces or action sequences. But with this, I do feel like the movie was kind of dragging. So it did liven it up a bit. But I don't think it was as interesting to the story. And the story's not the greatest, especially considering how it was written by Ernesto Gastaldi. Definitely not his best work. But so yeah, at worst, I would say it's disappointing. If you have a lot of the same Giallo as I do, you might feel the same. But it's still definitely worth checking out. So with that, I'm going to get into spoilers. So Paolo's higher ups keep getting more and more pissed off at him because he's being a bit too reckless. But at one point, he finds out that Marissa's last name was Pesci. He finds this out because he goes to the babysitting agency, holds them all hostage, even shoots into the wall to scare them into information. And this one woman says her last name was Pesci, or Pesh. So now that he has that, they're able to contact a next of kin for an identification, which is her uncle, her very rich banker uncle. And he notices, so then while he's being interviewed at his big luxurious townhouse, Paolo notices a picture with a Marissa, the girl that was killed at Menga's, and this one other girl. And apparently, the whole prostitution ring was centered around these three girls. And the last one alive is this girl named Gloria. So, and Giannino knows who she is. So Paolo puts it on him to get close to her because his attempt didn't work. Which, she's going down the stairs. Giannino trips her. And she's wearing heels, so she falls down the stairs. But Paolo catches her. They act like nothing happened. He wasn't invited in when he returned her home. So he has Giannino try to get close to her. And so that's when they go to the movies, which had the You Mice in the Locked Room poster. And he has Giannino pretend to kiss her while he sits behind and asks questions. Apparently, Marissa and her uncle hated each other. Apparently, he had been molesting her since she was 13. She says that he had given them white powder, which she says we know what it was later, but it's obvious it was cocaine. And, got them to perform, he would give them all drugs, get them to perform sexual acts for him and some of it, his acquaintances, and it became this, well-organized child trafficking ring. And so that's when there's another chase. Because before Paolo knows that they're getting closer because Sunglasses goes after the woman at the boarding house. He stabs her a bunch of times. He goes after the red-headed prostitute that was helping Paolo, which she got the drop on him. Before she was strangled, he goes to her house and she hides and then throws boiling water on him, which by the time we get to the movie scene, I do like the effects of his burnt and blistered skin. So there's a chase on the roof of the movies, which the roof opens up, I'm guessing, for emergency fire, so they can just drop water in it. I didn't know theaters did that. But, so Paolo's hanging from the opening, and just as Sunglasses about to shoot him, Giannino comes up and shoots him, and he falls dead. And it just kind of keeps going because Paolo eventually confronts the uncle up front, pretty much saying, I know what you're doing. I know about the molesting since she was 13 and the friends and all that. And then Paolo is confronted by some other banker guy who says he has a client who wants to give you this check. Obviously, it's Pesci. One, there's a large check, and then there's a second large check, pretty much as an offer to back off. And he knows it's Pesci because the guy says, my client says you can use it to buy a new pair of glasses, which Pesci did say to Paolo. Which Paolo acts like he accepts because he goes back to his higher up. He's got new glasses, a new suit, and he acts like he's resigning. But it's so they'll stay off his back because he's been so reckless that they're starting to, keep tabs on him. Also, this I didn't see coming, but Giannino picks Gloria up, I guess for a date, and she has this present, and he's like, and it's not for me, I don't know who it's from. So they get on his scooter, and she goes to open it, and it explodes, and it kills both of them. And that's what gives Paolo, that's when he says, it's time to go. He tracks Pesci to this train. Oh, also, another cool shot is when Pesci says, why don't you buy yourself some new glasses? He says, oh, I've already got a pair. I got these. And it's the hitman's sunglasses. But when he holds them up, we see Pesci's reflection in them when he was like, oh, yeah, nice. Yeah, how about you just leave? So, yeah, there's still some good Sergio Martino direction and cinematography, but not like his earlier films. So he's on the train. That's when he confronts Pesci, and he pretty much says, I know about the cocaine, I know about the child prostitution ring, even though we saw that the office for Babysitters Anonymous has been cleared out since he held them hostage. But he says, oh, I planted the drugs in your townhouse, which means they'll want to investigate you further. I have pictures of proof with drugs. I know all about the banking. It pretty much tells him everything. He makes one final offer for money. He doesn't say anything. He just stares at him. They both take out a gun, but Paolo's able to shoot and kill him, and then it just ends. So yeah, it feels like it's more complex than it really needs to be. And I've always found Giallo with inheritance and banks and blackmail and just how deep it goes, or the big conspiracies. The more complex ones to be obviously a little harder to follow, but also the ones that, I really like the more subtle Giallo, Don't Torture a Duckling, which I'm still in spoilers, so. Priest kills young boys before they can sin. Pretty simple. And this one was no exception. I think this one had more layers than it needed to. I mean, you had marked bills and banking and kidnapping and ransom, teenage girl trafficking, drug trafficking. It had more than it needed. I mean, the suspicious death of a minor, it could have just been another murder mystery by Martino, and I would have been perfectly happy with it. But still, it's nowhere near amongst the worst Giallo I've seen. Certainly not a contender for even an honorable mention of my bottom 10. It's in that mid-range of, okay, it's there. I'm glad I saw it, but I probably won't watch it again. And yeah, at worst, I could say it's disappointing, especially seeing how it's a Sergio Martino film. But with that, that is 1975's Suspicious Death of a Minor. And stay tuned for more Italian horror and Giallo films. Thank you for watching.